Let's get sweaty.
Yep.
So going down the page of the website here, you can see the interview date, who it's conducted by, Phantom Riverstone, and of course James from Shenmue Dojo. The first section is Virtua Fighter RPG. So we're starting right at the beginning of everything here, and I actually think that makes a lot of sense here. So the first question is around Virtua Fighter RPG. So here we go. So as Shenmue fans, we were very interested in the early form of Shenmue, which was going to be called a project called Virtua Fighter RPG. Do you still possess the original design document and other materials that you created for Virtua Fighter RPG?
Yeah, so the thinking behind this question was just to sort of understand what material they actually have from back in those days that are going to help them to structure a storyline in Shenmue 3 and 4. We're hoping to sort of get that sort of nugget of information that sort of says that, oh, they've still got all this old material. It's not stuck in a vault somewhere in Sega's offices. So, Shenmue, the future of Shenmue is in good hands in that sense because it's based on this old material from back in the day.
Yeah.
So Yu Suzuki's answer actually is, Virtua Fighter RPG was my first RPG title, and it was creating something that was entirely new, which carried a risk. So I thought that creating an RPG using the Virtua Fighter IP might be safer, which led to the project. However, not a lot of material remains now. So yeah, like I was saying, where's that material now? It must be in a Sega vault somewhere, which I don't know. You'd think they would all have copies of these things, but obviously not.
And it's very interesting that, isn't it, that they don't have a lot of that material. Obviously, coming down the page a little bit here, you can see the photo of the scripts. This is from a Game Informer interview from 2019. And Switch, I believe, translated that white page on the right-hand side, didn't it? It's on its website.
Yeah.
So, sort of follow up to that, it's a question. You make reference to the Game Informer 2019 interview. There's photos showing the scripts.
Yeah, it sort of comes back in before we finish the question. It says like these ones are almost Shenmue. They're not quite, they're not Virtua Fighter RPG. These, so they must have quite a few different stages of design documents. So Virtua Fighter RPG, and then the progress. And he says these are almost Shenmue that he's showing in that image.
Which is interesting to sort of think about the progression of this thing. When you think it obviously started development on the Saturn, there'd have been a draft there. It's then potentially been restarted on the Saturn accelerated hardware, which we know existed. And that's talked about in another interview that we've done fairly recently. Mm-hmm. And then obviously then restarted again for a third time on the Dreamcast, so the amount of design documents they must have gone through to get to the point of Shenmue, it's staggering, really. It's insane. We can sort of see where the money went, I guess, a little bit.
True. Yeah. Somebody rewrites and whatnot.
Yeah. So then the next question is, what is the difference between the blue books and the white pages?
Yeah. So this was an interesting one. We kind of, obviously we got that Game Informer photograph there. We just kind of wanted to know what the difference was between the blue books and the white pages. And Yu Suzuki says that the white pages are the novelized version and the blue books contain the scripts. So very interesting. So he actually left the room at this point because obviously he wanted to show us these blue books, and amazingly that is something that we were hoping would happen, if you know what I mean, as well, because seeing these historic pieces of Shenmue history is crazy for a big fan. So he actually left the room and returned with the 5 Legend of Akira blue books. And he said that these are the scripts with the dialogue. So they're for the cast. They were given to each of the voice actors. The pages have a space at the top for the actors to write notes. So that was interesting. That was something I didn't actually realise. So those blue original Legend of Akira books are actually the ones that were handed out to cast members for voice lines. And then the white paper in that image is actually the novelized version. So they kind of have like a book written, in a sense, of the outline of Shenmue, which is very interesting.
That is interesting. It does beg the question, I guess, that if worse came to worse, they would be in a position that they could release a novel fairly swiftly, by the sounds of it, if they wanted to. Obviously, that's the last resort. We know that all the time that there's a chance, etc., etc. He wants to make Shenmue in game form. But it's interesting that it's already been novelized, and then they've expanded that into the script. That
Yeah,
makes sense.
that makes sense. Yeah.
So, I'd be very interested to see what's in that one of those scripts, which we'll come on to in one of the next questions. But you then asked the question: were they the scripts used for the actual Shenmue?
Yeah, and then he turned around and said yes. The name was later changed to Shenmue, and then the books that he was showing us, we made the point that they were kind of like a B5 size, because they always felt or looked like they were bigger than they actually were. So when you're actually holding them, they're more like a B5 size, and the paper inside's like a slightly yellowed coloured. But he said that was because they're printed on a specific type of paper. A really nice paper, actually, like almost like that sort of aged look to them, even though they are an old an old book as such, because they are like 25 plus years now. But that was the actual design of them as well when they were made, like the sort of yellow coloured paper. And then there's a serial number on the back of each of them to sort of keep track of them all. So if they ever, got in the hands of the wrong person or something, they could maybe potentially track that back to where it would have come from, I guess.
So they're going to hunt you down if you steal them, basically.
Exactly.
And then you go on to ask, were they the ones used in the Kickstarter award, or very similar to that?
Yeah. Well, Yu Suzuki says that's right. So they were the same ones from the Kickstarter. They go up to chapter 5, which was interesting. So there isn't actually any chapters after that have been written. He says this one is Yokosuka. Chapter 1, he was showing us the first one, and then chapter 2, Hong Kong, where Ren shows up. And the progression of the game differs from the way that he had first planned, though. So this one contains the script for Shuzo. So that was chapter 3. But in the game, Guilin is shown first, so the order is reversed compared to the original order. And he says Shuzo will be in Shenmue 4 instead. So if you think, obviously, after Hong Kong, we went to Kowloon, but that's kind of that same chapter 2. And then the next chapter was Guilin, which is chapter 5, so they sort of skipped the 3 and 4, which is what he means there. That's the structure of the game has changed from these original designs. And then he's now saying, which is, I think it's the first time he's actually publicly said this, but Shuzo, which is chapter 3, will be in Shenmue 4 instead. So if you think back to the chapter tiles map, and it kind of feels like the chapter tiles are based on these books. I'm not too sure about the Baisha book, which was the 5th book.
Yeah.
But the 3rd chapter tile is the train journey to Shuzo, and then I think chapter 4 chapter tile is Shanghai on that chapter tile outline. So yeah, make of that as you will. If we're going to Shuzo, does that mean the train's going to be there now? Has he kind of confirmed that or not? I don't know.
That's interesting, and also when you look at the chapter cards as well, obviously you've got 1 and 2, which are we're very, very familiar with what those are.
Yeah.
Then you've got the train, which we've talked about in the podcast we did fairly recently, depends when we air this, but
true.
And then after that, you've then got what looks like a fighting arena. Is it Shanghai? Could it be Shuzu? There's a lot there that could be merged together, perhaps. And it does fit in with what he said in the Shenmue Master interviews that we've been through, that things are interchangeable. So just because that something hasn't appeared that's been essentially, left behind, for want of a better expression, that hasn't been used yet, doesn't mean it can't reappear down the line in a new structure going forward for the story. And that's quite exciting, actually, that we may still get something close to the content they had originally planned, albeit in a different order.
Which I'm perfectly happy with. If he thinks that the story's suited this way, compared to like those original old things, and he's tailoring the story down these paths and stuff like that sort of make more sense, I guess. I don't know, but it's nice to at least be confirmed that Shuzo will be in Shenmue 4 instead. He's literally just, that is a statement that he says. So
he's just openly awesome. Said that, which is that's quite a nice nugget.
Very nonchalant as well.
Yeah, just chucks that in there. But it's good for us as well, because now we can get excited about, we know where this is going in terms of the next place we're going to visit and potentially how we get there. And when you think of the Project Berkeley stuff, where you see well, he's Akira at the time, but Ryo hanging off that train, for example. Can you imagine playing that now?
That is honestly, that is just leaps out to me as like a crazy moment that if we ever do get that to that point where that actual scene happens, it's going to be like a mind-blown experience because it's something that we saw so long ago, and it just shows that there's still intentions there to that is where Rio's heading. That's part of his journey, and you know, this was a cool answer, I thought.
Yeah.
To sort of get that confirmation. And then he was
Yeah.
showing us the fifth book, which again, thinking about it now, sort of confuses me that it's called Baisha. So they got this document that doesn't kind of match up to the chapter tiles if you think about it, because the fifth chapter tile is Guilin, yet the fifth book here he's saying is Baisha. So as he's showing us this book, he says this one is Baisha, which hasn't appeared yet, because obviously it was originally slated to be in Shenmue 3. Which leads on to the next question quite well, and just make a mention that there's Switch holding all 5 of the chapter books there, Legend of Akira books. And you may notice we've sort of covered up the monitors. They had like 3 monitors in the back of the room there, just in case there was anything on there. I don't think there was, but I just thought it was better to cover it up just in case.
Yeah, safety first and all of that.
The big screen actually did have the Shenmue Dojo website on, but
I did it.
Yeah, when we walked in, the Shenmue Dojo website was on there, so it's quite cool to see. Yeah, that they've been checking us out.
Proud of that, actually.
Maybe vetting us, make sure
making sure we're legit.
Exactly.
Oh dear, that's quite good. I like that. I really like that. That's cool. Okay then, so like you say, it leads into the next question really well here. And the question is, Baisha was mentioned during the Shenmue 3 Kickstarter, but ended up not being included in the game. Is there a possibility that this will turn up in the future?
And he says, it depends how things go. And then he's pointing to the book. He says, this contains the lines for some of the cutscenes, which is interesting. Ooh. So if they are wanting like an easy game to make, Baisha seems like it's kind of already been built, at least in, you know, cutscene dialogue and storylines and stuff like that. So that could be something that's a little bit more easy for them to make in the future than perhaps a chapter that hasn't even been started yet.
Yeah, because it's already been taken from that novel into what is essentially now a script. Whereas I'm guessing the others, they're going to have to take it from the novel, which I'm guessing that exists for all the chapters in some way, shape, or form. They're then going to have to script that out in order to then make a game. But I think that's where, when you go back to Yu Suzuki talking about he wanted to work with screenwriters and all the rest of it, I think that's where that could play in really well. If obviously we get to a Shenmue 4 or beyond that, I think that's where that strength could really come into its own, potentially, assuming there's the budget for it, of course. And then, funny enough, we talk about the novelised bits. The next question is, does a novelised version for it exist?
It does, but that's top secret. The novelised version is thicker. So it's interesting because obviously each of these Legend of Akira books are various thicknesses, and I think the Baisha one was probably the thinnest of all 5.
Interesting.
So that's kind of him just sort of pointing out that the novelised version of Baisha is thicker than this book.